So like most people, I've been looking at all the news about the shortage of personal protective equipment for medical workers and other volunteers that are kind of on the front line of the virus going around right now. And it didn't really hit home until my girlfriend came home, who's a nurse, and said that they were experiencing the same issue. So I started to look at how to help produce PPE using some kind of DIY methods, and I found that a lot of people were sewing masks and 3D printing them, which are all awesome initiatives to help your local healthcare workers protect themselves. However, I noticed that each of the times that you have to make a single mask using these methods, it takes just a lot of time, and it's not necessarily a super scalable approach. And so what I wanted to do is come up with a way that we could quickly and easily produce masks locally to help our healthcare organizations. But in addition to that, these masks had to be reusable, totally recyclable, sanitizable, and having the ability to actually custom fit them for the wearer so that they actually created a seal. On top of that, they had to make use of really the scarce filter materials that we have right now. And so what I came up with was a simple mask design that can be made in about 3 minutes. You can sanitize it with bleach, with any other disinfecting agent, and then once you're done using it and reusing it, you can actually melt it back down and form another mask out of it using the same process that we used to create it. So with the following few steps, let's outline how to make one of these things and see what you think. Of course, as you watch this, if you notice any areas that could use improvement or you think could make the process even more efficient, I'd love to hear it. If you just want to make a comment down below, that'd be great. So let's jump into it. The first thing we're going to be doing is 3D printing our mold. You can see the link in the description to find the design for this, and feel free to tweak it as you like to see what works for your application. Once that mold is done, we're going to bring it over into our working area and get ready to start forming our material. For this one, I've been using a polycaprolactone that's just found on Amazon. I'll put the link to that as well. And for this, I use about 1/3 of a cup. I found that this is plenty to form a single mask for our uses. And this stuff is called Instamorph. Again, I think it was like 10 bucks on Amazon. But first, you're going to sprinkle this around the bottom of a boiling pot of water, trying to create a uniform layer on the bottom of the pan. This just makes it easier to form a more uniform sheet, which is ultimately what we're going to be forming the material into. You'll find that the material clumps together naturally, so it's not too hard to pick up out of the pan. Once it's formed a translucent or transparent beads, then what you can do is form it with your hands. Be careful, it's going to be a little bit hot once you grab it out of the pan. But then you can use a rolling pin to form it into more of a sheet. Next, what I'd like to do with this is after I roll it out once, I tend to fold it over to make sure that any holes are covered, and it creates a uniform layer of this material. You can just put it back into the hot water to remelt it. It only takes a few seconds. Then pull it back out and reshape it again with that rolling pin. I found a few attempts at this is totally fine. Sometimes it takes about 2 to 3 rolling out to get this thing completely uniform, but you can find you can probably even do it in 2 tries. Finally, see that it turns more of a whitish translucent color when you know it's about ready to be formed. And the key thing to remember here is that when you're ready to form this, it should not stick to the mold that you just created. This means that it needs to cool down just a little bit before you can place it in the mold. Make sure that the sheet is just going to cover the edges of the bottom piece of the mold, and once you've rolled it out enough to the point where it does, you can cup the bottom using your hands, holding the edges in place while you push down on the center piece of the mold. Make sure you apply uniform pressure on all sides of the mold and rub out the edges of the material so that it's creating a flat top on the top of the mold, so that ultimately you can cut it out using a pair of scissors. It's important to make sure that you cut this far enough away from the edge so it does have a flat portion on the outside of the mold. This is what ultimately is going to be resting against your face,
And if you don't have this flat portion, it can create a rough edge that rests against your face, which, as you can imagine, would be relatively uncomfortable. When you pull apart the extra pieces of plastic around the mold, don't throw those away, keep those. What I found is with this polycaprolactone, you can actually remelt it and reuse it into additional masks that you want to use. Once you're ready, you can pull it out relatively easily, and there you have it. There's your end result of molding this polycaprolactone using these 3D printed molds, and it only takes a minute or two. Look it around, inspect it, make sure there's no holes in the mask, which would ultimately lead to leakages, which obviously we don't want. And when you're ready, put it back in the hot water, just the edge of the mask, so we can form it to our faces. You want to make sure that this custom fitting step is crucial, because if you don't do this, there's a good chance that it won't seal against your face, which is not what you want. Next, once you formed it, you press against your nose and the bottom of your chin. Then just move your fingers around the edge of the mask to make sure that it creates a uniform seal. Because we haven't put holes in this yet, it should seal completely and not allow you to breathe when you suck in air wearing the mask as it is now. Now we'll use a screwdriver to punch some holes in it. I found that the bigger the holes, the better, just so you can breathe easier in this thing. Next, what we want to do is create the retainer strap that we're going to use to hold the elastic bands around our face. First thing is I'm going to double over a rubber band and make sure it fits snugly on the filter portion of the mask. Next, I'm going to loop around 2 rubber bands to act as my head straps. Now, I'd recommend using larger bands than this because rubber bands this small are pretty uncomfortable to wear on your head. Make sure you straighten it out so there's not too many knots in it, and when you're ready, you can fit it over the filter portion of the mask where it'll stay relatively snugly. Next, what you're going to want to do is fit the zip tie around the filter portion of the mask. This is ultimately going to act as the retainer ring for our filter material. Next, put on the straps and fit them around the mask so that they resemble a standard N95 mask that you'd find in other applications. Next, place your filter material over the filter portion of the mask and place the retaining ring over that. In this example, I'm just using paper towel, which obviously isn't a good filter medium, so I'd recommend using something more like MERV 13 filters, which a lot of people have been using, or even just HEPA certified vacuum bags, which has been another option that people have been using. For this example, I tore away the extra material, but you want to be really careful when you do this to make sure that there's no gaps under the retainer ring that you created. At this point, your mask is all set and it's ready to go.